Good morning, good evening, good afternoon to all of you watching. This is a conversation with Kay Stabang from Hong Kong, Don Norman from San Diego, Ken Friedman from Sweden, and Paul Heckert from Delft about graduate education. I'm going to start this with a statement and then ask my colleagues to respond. I think compared to most fields, graduate education in design is not doing its job in building the field. Design is arguably getting more attention and more requests to do a broader range of larger projects than ever before. And we're still relying upon the informal information that we've had for years. And with few exceptions, professors in graduate schools are not spending time looking at the chaos of practice and finding patterns and developing new theories to move things forward. And for us to succeed with this newfound popularity and not stumble into a design bubble, I think we need to work harder at developing theories and methods and not just doing an advanced version of undergraduate education. So I'm going to leave my statement at that and open it up to my friends to comment. Don, perhaps I could start with you.
Because you know what I'm going to say. I'm going to say, why are you restricting it to graduate education? Because actually the undergraduate education we get in design then colors what happens in graduate school. Because I really feel that today we are turning out craftspeople. Not all the schools, but the majority of schools of design are craft schools, which we learn wonderful techniques for form giving, shaping, drawing, materials, about manufacturing. And then the graduate school is simply 2 more years of that, and who can blame the instructors? Because that's how instructors themselves were taught, so they don't have any other knowledge. And as we get asked to do other things, that's what our Design X manifesto is all about. And the recent paper that I wrote with Peter Jan Stoppers, that was saying, hey, we're being asked to design health systems or educational systems or financial systems, and yet our people, and undergraduates and graduates, get no education about the world. It's 4 years or whatever the length of undergraduate education in your country of craft skills. And I think that should change. I just wrote a paper. It was written for the Design Institute of Design's, no, the Industrial Design's 50th anniversary at the University of the Republic of San Marino. Someday it will come out. And it said, look, we're reaching a fork in the road in design. We can go the craftsmanship road, or we can start teaching people about complex systems and the kinds of knowledge about economics and politics and social structures required to do that. Which direction should we take? And I said, in the words of Yogi Berra, the famous American baseball player, when you come to the fork in the road, take it. Design education should move in both directions, but you should choose. If I want to solve the educational problem, I don't have to know how to draw. I really don't. And that frees up maybe 2 years of the educational process. But I do need to know about the world.
So I'll respond to your question about why not undergrad later, and let the others start with their comments first. Ken, do you want to go next?
Yeah, it seems to me that the greatest problem with graduate education, why it's having such a tough time moving forward, is simply look at who we have teaching. Almost every design school in the world today has the same people teaching as we're adding these new forms of graduate education that they had teaching 10, 15 years ago. It's extremely difficult to create cultural change within an existing institution. You've got to have both a strategy and support from the top level of the university for a period of 7 to 10 years. And normally it doesn't happen. People dig their heels in. So where you've had a school that moves forward slowly, carefully, painstakingly to create change. This is what we see at IIT in Chicago. This is what we see at TU Delft. Or this is what we see in a place that's essentially greenfield, where there has been no design education, and as a result, you can build an institute like Don's Institute because they get to pick and choose from across the disciplines. The struggle that I faced when I was a dean is I had a lot of people. It would have been unfair to try and force them out or fire them, but it was equally difficult to try and make progress. There's got to be something both in the way of better undergraduate education, and here I'm sort of agreeing with Don's pretty blunt question, so that you get a design education where people know more about the world, but we've also got to re-educate or develop the people who are teaching rather than give in to cultural inertia. And for the most part, it's an extremely difficult process if you don't have 7 to 10 years.
Paul, how do you feel about this?
There's case. Yeah, let me go back to the distinction that Don makes between, let's say, the crafts-based education and a more academic take on design education. I think that we have seen this big divide over many decades, and it's a divide that is slowly solving itself, at least in some places in the world. And I very much encourage that development. I think we need both. We need the craftsmanship still, even if we are dealing with the bigger systems, with the socio-technical systems. But at the same time, we need the academic understanding of the world, as you said. We need the academic mindset that is needed to properly understand the complexity of the world we are facing and the people therein, and how to make sense of that world and to respond properly. So on the one hand, you need an academic attitude to come up with proper responses, well-founded responses, but at the same time you need the skill set to translate those responses into, well, appropriate manifestations of whatever kind.
Mm-hmm. Case?
Well, my mind is with the people in San Marino. I think they're still digesting the rich information they received from Don. I think I disagree with Don and partially agree with Paul. I think the world still needs like design workers, with all due respect. Some people have to make a packaging, some people have to make a poster, some people have to kind of make modifications to products. The world needs these people. They need to be educated and they need to have skills. When they have kind of an affinity with academic thinking and go beyond, let's say, the pure craftsmanship, fine, that's very good. But many of those, they go into the practical field, and only few of them come back to do the graduate education. And then they are in class with not only those with a design background, then they are in class with those who have done business and engineering and who come from other fields, who are open to learn more about design leadership and problem solving and these kinds of things. And those people, I think, they can be educated to become design leaders. And so I think it's not so critical to always have been educated initially in design, as long as you're kind of open to kind of learn from what design is and can do. And of course you can, when these people are a little bit more advanced in their already and more mature, you can really give them more difficult problems. They have a better understanding. They've been reading more newspapers. They know better what's happening in the world. They have a little bit of system thinking already, which you can then further nurture. So I make a big distinction between with all due respect, the design workers and the design leaders.
I have a follow-up, but let's wait for Ina for us to go through everybody.
Yes, Ina, welcome. Ina, you're muted, I think. Don, why don't you do your follow-up while we're waiting for Ina to...
Okay, let me just, it'll be quick. First of all, we do need design workers. There's no disagreement about that. However, I feel that it's a different track, so I don't see why we couldn't have two different tracks. Because once someone goes out that practitioner's track, they don't read the newspapers, they don't follow the news necessarily. Yeah, the great ones do. But what about the majority of them? And when you come into graduate school in design, most design schools require a portfolio, require you to be a skilled craftsperson. So you said that maybe at Tech in Hong Kong, you don't require a portfolio. People can come in with only a business training or engineering training. So that's certainly true of using design, which is not true for majority of graduate schools. So,
excuse me, Don. Don, you have a problem with your audio. Could you turn off the other applications on your computer? If you've got Twitter or other things on, that will interfere with the audio. It's still not working.
I have nothing else. You must run just Chrome.
Could you try speaking directly into the computer and not the mic?
Yeah. Let's meanwhile for anything do it either.
Am I an issue?
Hey!
Ina, can you go ahead? The comment is about graduate education and the lack of progress in the field. And we're talking about what can be done to improve that and whether it needs to be done.
Sorry, I think it's probably better for me to listen into the conversation.
Okay, then let me answer.
Longer to be able to give action.
Then let me answer Don's question from a few minutes ago about why not undergraduate education. We could have the same conversation about undergraduate education. I think it's different enough situation from graduate education that they deserve their own topics. I'm particularly interested in the phenomena of the huge number of projects that designers are being asked to do now that are more complex than before. As Don mentioned, we covered this in our Design X conversations. The way we're teaching graduate education is not helping that situation in that it seems to be mostly a continuation of undergrad. The reason I think it's a problem more for graduate education is it's hard for faculty members to do research without graduate students to help them. There are other needs too, of course, but graduate students can help much more than undergrads, and to build a culture of research and building design knowledge that makes a difference to the field. I think the weight is going to follow more on the shoulders of graduate education than undergrad.
But who's teaching the graduate education? It's people trained in the traditional crafts who actually have no clue, and that's why the miserable quality of papers given at design conferences and the Design Research Conference and the IASDR Conference and definitely the Practitioners Conference. Ask Paul about the quality of Design in Motion, the Design Conference, which is perhaps the highest quality of the papers, and they're miserable because there's no background, no training. The professors themselves do not know what constitutes good argumentation and evidence.
You're right, and I didn't say it would be easy, but I think that we need to explore where it's going to start. Paul, do you have a comment about the quality of papers?
I have many comments about the quality of the papers. It's true. There's not a huge knowledge base in design and design research that we can build on, but I see it as improving all around the world, although it goes slowly. And the reason it goes slowly is that, as Don rightfully says, a lot of design education is still very much practice-oriented, profession-oriented, and so if you like to mention it, if you like to call it that way, crafts-oriented. So as long as we keep on thinking that a design school is only to train designers in their design skills, we maintain that situation. But that's why I argue that design education could be much more than just training designers to get great skills. We can train them to be true academics. And many years ago we launched this notion of the academic designer here in Delft, and I still like that notion. It's the academic designer is someone who has a profound understanding of what's going on in the world around them, who has a very thorough set of tools to study that world and to act responsibly and appropriately to that context. And I think those are the skills that we very much need to develop through our research, and then we can make the designers also more research-minded and more academic in that sense.
Yes, it raises the question a little bit of what is the core of design knowledge. If you look at what's taught in schools, you'd think the core of design knowledge is visualization and maybe user empathy and maybe knowing something about production. But if you look at what is valuable in design, even though it's not being formalized, there are a number of other skills that designers have and that people value, even though we haven't formalized them. For example, abstraction, taking a particular instance of an idea and abstracting it to its real value, or the opposite of taking an abstract idea and making it concrete. That's what we do when we're prototyping. The creation of value and paying particular attention to the creation of intangible value, the creation of exploratory options, exploring different options. Those are all things that we teach informally inside studio classes, but the students often don't know that they're experiencing them, and there's no theory for them to build upon. But those are skills inherent to the design field that desperately need codification and development so that we can use them in a more efficient and effective way. In a way, it's a call for a new type of design fundamentals. Right now, design fundamentals is drawing, color, model making. I think user research has become part of the new fundamentals. But there's many other things that designers do. Perhaps the most valuable one right now that executives find is the idea of abstraction and reframing. Taking a problem to its real essence and reframing it is incredibly valuable now. When I came into the field, you would get fired for not following the design brief. Now you get paid for doing something called reframing the problem.
Yeah, if I may comment to that, Patrick?
Yes, please.
Yeah, I think you're absolutely right. This whole notion of reframing, it entails that we regress to another level of thinking, which is much more about what you could call, let's say, the underlying purpose of the design. So yes. to design the purpose first before you get to the manifestation, that becomes much more critical these days. And that's also a skill. That's also something that we can train designers, but we often take it for granted in a lot of design education. Probably that has to do with what Ken said earlier about many of the people who are actually on the work floor in design schools are the craftsmen, and these craftsmen live in another reality where the purpose was almost, let's say, given, and the most important thing was to translate it into some kind of manifestation. And that's what we, especially at the undergraduate level, teach our students. But to first and foremost help students to articulate why they design what they design, and to give them the right knowledge base and tool set to find and to define that, let's say, the underlying reason of the design. That's something that we could train and should train, I think.
Yes. Any responses?
I would like to follow up on that a little.
Go ahead.
Yeah. Paul was saying something. It occurred to me, and again, it occurred to me even in relation to your comments before we began, Patrick. Say, looking at business schools or schools in other fields. And while there are these tensions between professional practice and research and even simple, straightforward, non-research oriented teaching, in all these fields, there's one thing that I think is quite different. In most business schools, you see a great many of the professors who have a very lively outside income from consulting. They stay active in the field they're in. I realized as I think about design schools, most of the people who teach in design schools are design teachers. If they've worked in the design field, it was usually long ago. They do not keep up an active practice, and the practice has moved on so far. I won't name any names, but I think of a guy, we all know him, wonderful guy. He actually does consult. He's a terrific author, but he told me once when we were sitting and talking that even though he once had a professional design practice that was quite lively, he said he couldn't get back into the field today. And we're talking at a previous excellent practitioner who's now an excellent scholar and researcher. Whereas at most design schools, you're talking about people who may have worked a couple of years after they graduated, then they got into the university, and they're totally separate from the field. So in addition to the possible natural break between the field of practice and the field of research, there's a real break in the personal skill sets of many of the people who teach.
Excuse me a second. I missed the point. What's the moral of the story of your wonderful designer who used to have a practice and now couldn't get back in? Was it that his skills were wrong?
No. The moral is it's something that Paul mentioned that triggered in me. Many of the people who teach in design schools, you can't really call them designers anymore. They're design teachers, and they have a skill set that they learned years ago, but they couldn't practice. They're design teachers. They teach basic craft skills, and that's all they could manage in many cases.
Right. And there are two ways out of this, Ken.
They are?
Well, two of the ways that we, at least here in Delft, try. One is to appoint, for example, we recently appointed 5 professors of practice who have appointments of 1 or 2 days a week in which they bring in their expertise from design practice into the school. They teach, but at the same time they maintain a substantial amount of their position in design practice. So they keep on being active as leaders in the professional field as well. That's one. And the second one is that more people, let's say the better design researchers, the ones that do proper research and publish about it, that they also become or stay very active in design education and also at the undergraduate level. What we see often is that these people, they try to well, sort of hide themselves in graduate education where they can use the graduate students for their research. But I think it is important for the undergraduates that they also are confronted with these, let's say, academics in the design discipline.
Yes. Anyone else want to comment on the role of practice and theory?
Maybe I may add a little bit to this.
Sure.
I think these are the things we do indeed, and there's another thing that is emerging in our school, which is together with companies and students and teachers in order to solve problems. So that's a way for us also to stay more connected, because that they're asking them for help. And in order to really solve problems, you need to really understand these companies and their situation in order to be able to be of help. So we need to find ways to come closer to the people that work with the designs or need the designs in the end. And therefore I think we need to also be closer to companies that need this thinking. That's one side of it. And the other side of it is I think that we need to teach our students to be, yeah, I said, to use more basic knowledge by allowing them to be more, to take the abstraction at a higher level. Because very often they have some knowledge, but not enough knowledge to really reflect on the problem well enough. So in that sense, I think that you need a diverse group of students that have somewhat different expertise. One is more in psychology, maybe the other one is more in technology, to make sure that they can zoom out enough in order to reflect more so than just what you would do on a product. And I hope together with these labs, we can combine these two things, come closer to companies, but also help companies to reflect much more on what they're doing, on the question behind the question.
I think the challenge is still, we tend to do this in a project-oriented basis, that doing what you just described causes the projects to be done better, but it doesn't develop a body of information outside of the experience of the people doing it that can help accelerate the field. We do a lot of work with companies as well. They sponsor classes, not where they care about what the result of the class is, but because they want to see our processes and move those processes into the companies. And a lot of corporations sponsor academic research on the level of the faculty members, but it's a challenge to find places to write. Thank you, Ken, for creating Shija, the new journal that deals with practical innovation as well as theory. But there are so few venues like that where you can publish work that is relevant to the field, yet rigorous for its research methodology. I think part of the problem is so many of the research journals, I'll reword that. Part of the problem is that we don't have many journals that deal with the theory applied to practice. So many of the papers are reflections upon previous papers rather than on the challenges facing organizations.
If I may, I don't think we should talk too long about the journals, but I think there's only, we can only say there's not enough good journals if there's really good papers that cannot get published. I think all good papers can get published now. So I think there's not a lack of journals. I think we have enough. But what I want to add on the education is, in fact, I find it very important that designers learn to collaborate with people from other disciplines. So in addition to having designers who are, lead professionals, and I think we bring them into the school as well. That's what we do in Hong Kong, just as people do in Delft and in other places. I think it's also good to bring in non-designers. So those are the people from the business field, those from the engineering field. And then also for students to sit together with those in class and see how they solve problems and to really reflect on that. And at the same time, I'm really proud of the one PhD student I supervised who also did her PhD project on the collaboration between disciplines in the early stages of innovation processes. So that's kind of helping to build some kind of knowledge, and this was about action repertoires, so kind of what are things that you can do to overcome certain problems that you may have in dealing with people from other disciplines. So there's kind of, I think, we do things and we also have kind of a way of codifying, we have a way of slowly but gradually developing knowledge that's relevant and will take the field further. So I'm not so pessimistic, I must say.
Let me comment a little bit. First of all, this split between how we train undergraduates and graduate school students does not exist in any of the other disciplines I've worked in. Right now, I'm a member of the faculty of the Department of Psychology, Department of Cognitive Science, and the Department of Electrical and Computer Engineering. And I work with the people in arts and humanities and the School of Medicine. Yeah. And let me tell you that the graduate education is no different. The graduate education is no different than the undergraduate. It's simply more advanced in the same topics. Second, working with industry. The problem I see in design schools is that industry comes with the traditional problems, that the designers in industry are usually at a middle or low level. They do not have a major say in the products that get done or the strategy.
The ratio is, there's a certain ratio of the cheese sauce to the bolognese. And that's the ratio you have to preserve. Okay.
I
Are you
presume.
talking to us, Ken?
I'm sorry?
Are you
Would
talking
you-
to us?
Yes. Did that statement about cheese sauce have a relationship to what I was saying?
Oh, I'm sorry. I thought I had turned off the speaker. I just had a question about some dinner that's underway.
Yeah. But turning off the speaker is the problem. You're supposed to turn off the microphone.
Oh my God.
Interesting, Ken. Interesting.
The world is interesting.
I thought that was a wonderful metaphor.
Yeah. I like
Anyway,
So actually,
let me point again. The design
ratio.
profession. You're still
ahead.
Start. Go ahead.
The design profession usually gets projects because the design profession itself in industry is seldom well regarded. That is, it's well regarded, but it's not up there at the strategy planning school place. The one place that trains people for that really well is the Institute of Design, Patrick's school. So your impression is a bit biased. So the projects they get are usually, hey, we just did this new oscillator, or we just did this new blender, or we're doing a new coffee maker, help us do the forming, or do this or that. That doesn't advance the field. And what we get in the engineering and psychology and cognitive science fields is we get people working together, usually on research issues. But you see, there's no industry that does research and design. There is an industry that does research in psychology and cognitive science and engineering and medicine. And so it's going to be very hard to start to build this base. Just saying we bring in industry doesn't do it. And Patrick, your school was isolated like a lot of standalone design schools. So it's really hard for your students to work together with people from law, from engineering, from business. So you're not going to like this, but I'm really glad that the School of Design at IIT is moving to the main campus where you can actually have these mixed classes.
Well, we're doing those mixed classes now. We're teaching almost every undergraduate in the university design. We're moving not to the main.
That's not what I said. It's not we should teach design to everybody. We should have classes where designers have to sit in engineering classes and business classes and vice versa. And then when we do projects, they are people from all these disciplines and they are treated equally.
Yes, I
One
understand.
doesn't dominate the other.
So just to clarify, though, we're moving into the law school downtown, not to the main campus. That may come in the future, but it's a long way off. I would like to shift the topic away from practice versus education versus research to the idea of where fields come from and where they emerge from. And I don't know if Don is the only psychologist on the panel.
I'm also a psychologist myself.
Yes.
Good, because I'm going to butcher a little bit of psychology history. My uninformed sense of it is that there was a guy named William James who was not a psychologist, but was a medical doctor and a philosopher.
No, philosopher. Remember, the field of psychology barely existed. It was in its infancy.
Why don't you, Don, tell us about William James and the formation of the field of psychology?
No, I'm not sure where you're going. A lot of fields have come out of philosophy. Most of the in the early days, philosophy basically was it, and almost all the applied schools have come out of philosophy.
Where I'm going with this is that fields emerge from other fields, from the edges of other fields, where there's a need for a new field to emerge. It borrows from other fields. So, for example, the field of public policy grew straight out of public administration, but also through economics and law. Public administration was, in the States, a informal war story-based program, very much like design schools today. And the small number of schools, Harvard, Berkeley, University of Chicago, Columbia, worked with the State Department and journals to develop a more formalized field, much smaller. Public administration still exists and is quite different from the new field of public policy.
But, you know, that's like saying that no invention comes from nowhere. I mean, they always come from taking this piece and that piece and that piece, and what's novel is the new combination. So obviously when you build a field, you have to build it out of the existing field. I actually helped build the field of cognitive science. And it was constructed with people from psychology, computer science, neuroscience, um, language, linguistics, sociology, anthropology. Those all came together to form a new kind of discipline, cognitive sciences.
Great example, thank you. And then my question then is it time for design to do, or for us to do something similar like that, where we don't try to change the design field from the center, but create something new on the edge?
I'm trying. That's exactly what I'm doing. I'm not in a school. I'm in a research institution, deliberately so. The chancellor said, I'm putting you there so you're not stuck in a discipline. And I work with, as I said earlier, the dean of social science, which includes psychology and cognitive science and communication and sociology and anthropology. And I work with the dean of engineering, and I work with the dean of arts and humanities, and I work with the dean of global policy and strategy, and I work with the dean of the School of Medicine. And we have all faculty and students from those departments in our one lab. We haven't yet put together a curriculum. It's really hard to do that for all the kinds of reasons we're just talking about.
Mm-hmm. Do our colleagues from Delft, who are at a much different scale than Dawn's program or my program, have a comment about changing the field? Paul, you mentioned something earlier about academics from different areas. I'm not sure if that relates to this.
Well, if I may, Delft has a very long tradition of bringing in people from all different disciplines into one school. People with a background in business, people with a background in engineering, people with a background in psychology and sociology. So we more or less are a living example of this hybrid discipline that we call designing, where all these different disciplines have to collaborate in order to come up with design answers to the problems that we face today. That doesn't mean that we are not struggling with our identity in our school and with the design identity globally, I think. So we are all continuously reinventing ourselves in the sense of what particular disciplinary take is more valuable, more important in a particular situation. That we are in interdisciplinary fields is well, non-negotiable, I would say. That's very clear to all of us. Where that will end up with, I'm curious to see that. I'm not sure.
Paul,
we need all these disciplines, but
do all the design faculty have a design degree?
No. I think most have.
There's a lot of them that do not have a design degree.
No.
I'm the only designer in our MT, and all the others have a different background, and that's all. So cross-faculty working together, and yeah, that's the way we come to new results. And one of the things they have to also learn to respect the other expertise that come in, and together try and zoom out and formulate the right problem. So we do quite a bit of it internally. On the other hand side, I think the classical disciplines we need to do more work to convince them of our added value. And it differs per discipline what is the added value that designers can bring. And that we do not yet have clear in mind. And it would help if we do have that clear in mind. What do the engineers learn from design? What do the psychologists learn from design? So what is our added value in the end? If we can formulate that better, we can have a much more focused program.
Hello, Lois.
Hi, Patrick. Am I late?
Hello.
Hello.
Yes.
Oh.
Am I late?
You are.
I'm late.
That's okay. We're happy to have you for 10 more minutes.
Oh, I miscalculated the time. I'm in the University of Cambridge, so I saw that the call will start from 10 minutes later.
Okay. 30% of our full-time faculty at ID are from other fields, and we find that extremely enriching.
So what does that tell you about graduate education and design? If both Delft and ID have mostly a large hunk of faculty not from design?
Tells you that it's lacking in many ways.
that it is a very young discipline that needs to mature. The new professors that we have appointed over the last couple of years are mostly designers or have been trained as a designer. I think it is not fair to say that people who did enter this school or any school with a non-design background after 20 years have not turned somehow into designers themselves.
That's true.
Maybe not in terms of practitioners, but they have attained a design mindset in some way. I think Kees has.
Yeah, in particular when you do a lot of design research, for instance. So even when you're not kind of in the making, but you do design research, you can still be a designer. So that kind of also changed over the years.
Exactly.
Also, if you include in the basic skills of design things like reframing and abstracting and creating value,
Exactly.
none of those depend upon drawing or model making.
I think designing a research is also a design in itself. And one of the things we try and find is a common attitude and also some sort of common language, a common way of working, so that people from different disciplines find a modus in which to work together or do research together is very important. And the only way to sort of build that is by trying somewhere and starting somewhere and publicizing on the knowledge that you have obtained and trying to create the same vocabulary.
So what's needed to bring about some sort of change? Is it a tiny group of lost souls who are in graduate schools now to somehow band together to do research? Is it a second or third journal that deals with research and practical matters like the one Ken is editing? Is it schools like ours and a few others that care about theory to band together and do something different from the regular field? Or do we just wait?
Some years ago, when Kees and Ken and I and Gerda Gemser from, she's now at RMIT in Melbourne, when we did a study on design journals and, let's say, the research policy of design researchers, we acknowledged, or we observed that there is an asymmetry between designers who refer to many of the model disciplines, so designers who refer to engineering journals or psychology journals, but there are very few psychologists making references to design journals. And I think that's a sign of our immaturity. When our work gets better, gets more mature, people in other disciplines start to find our work, our research, and start to acknowledge, let's say, the distinct quality of design research next to these other disciplines, and then it can become a discipline of its own.
Yes.
That maybe requires a few more years.
We're seeing an early example of that now with the work of Professor Kim Irwin in our school, where she's working very closely with a group of medical doctors in the behavioral aspects of medicine. Yeah. And she's becoming a principal investigator in NIH grants and principal author in medical journals. But she's developing knowledge and methods about design at the core of her work.
Yeah, right. But the sad thing about that is actually, I think it's good that she's doing that, and it's kind of a, it shows that there's quality and that there's a contribution that is appreciated in other fields, but it makes our own kind of development of our own field a little bit scattered. And so those kinds of publications are often not found by designers, so we do not really build upon that. So it's all over the place. And that does not help the development of a discipline. So I always, as a dean, I try to kind of stimulate good researchers to not only publish in the in the other fields, but to also have some of the good papers in design journals. Otherwise, it doesn't step up in terms of quality.
Yes, I'm trying to get Kim to be interested in Shija.
That would be good. If I could respond to the four things you mentioned, I would actually have to say all of the above. There's always a kind of series of motions that you see in fields. We do need more and better graduate schools. If you would ask me, I would I would never dare to state it out loud, but I've often, when people ask me about a PhD program, I say there's maybe 6, maybe 8 programs you can really consider, no more. And I would never dare to say out in public which the 6 or 8 are, because it would make everybody irritated and upset, would do no good. I think that there need to be more programs with greater strength. I think that as our journals begin to publish more good material, you'll see other fields starting to cite to us. And what I've noticed is in a couple of fields, you see a few things that we've never had. I was hoping back before the GFC, and I had what I was going to be a significantly greater amount of resources than I finally got when I was a dean. I was going to try to create something like a mini Institute for Advanced Studies, where people can really work together, come together, interact around questions from multiple fields. I think this may still happen, but I don't know who's ever going to do it. And I've often dreamed about something a little bit like what the economists have in the Mont Pelerin Society, where there might be 50 or 60 people interested enough in serious questions that they give some serious part of their lives to research, collaboration, papers, discussions that then go on to have impact. So I think the 4 things Patrick mentioned and these couple of other things, this can make eventually a difference. But I think what everybody's saying is none of it's going to happen overnight.
So I want to take us into maybe the last major topic of our conversation, which needs a whole hour unto itself, which is the nature of evidence. Evidence was a major topic in the first Design X harangue, and it's very interesting to me because so many of the reasons design is being adopted by companies now is because we are more free-flowing and more accepting and live in a world of probabilism rather than the world of proof that executives have liked to live in through the past. My conjecture is that execs are discovering that the world of certainty and determinism has gone away, and that the old methods that were based upon making accurate predictions are less reliable, and that the probabilistic space that design plays in is where the value is. It brings up the idea of self-evident improvement as opposed to research studies that show statistical significance is one of the dilemmas that comes up. I was just, as an example of self-evident improvement, I was just at United Way in Detroit, where Mike Brennan showed a form, a 64-page form that poor people in Michigan have to fill out to get help, and he turned it into a 5-page form. To me, that's self-evident proof point that is better than the 64-page form.
No, it isn't. Absolutely not. That's evidence that you can make a shorter form. What's important? You have to ask what the form is all about and how it is being used and what role it plays. And in order to show that it actually was an improvement, you have to look at the outcomes.
That's true, but if you look at the language simplification that went on...
I'm sorry, but that's actually what the problem is. We measure the easy things as opposed to what's important. And the fact that you made a shorter form, well, yeah, that's, of course, that's motherhood. We all know that should be done. But did it actually work? That's what evidence is about.
Maybe it should be longer.
Yes, who knows? Or maybe it shouldn't be a form. It should be an interview. We don't know. But you're not going to find out if all you do is measure, hey, we made it shorter. Look, I just got that. Somebody just had a new method of measuring emotion. And in order to prove that this was a fantastic new tool, they showed that it correlated with other measures of measuring emotion. That's not the right kind of evidence.
That's convergent validity.
It's true,
Yes.
but executives can't wait for proof. In the new design challenges they're facing,
I'm sorry, but you speak out of both sides of your mouth, Patrick. Either you want a more substantive, in-depth research, or you want the practitioners who do what they're always doing. And oh no, we don't have time to do experiments.
Actually, I'm saying there's a third way. So in Kim's work, for example, it's about reducing the incidence of asthma in poor people and poor kids in the south side of Chicago. It turns out that there are holes in the walls in these slum dwellings where rodents and cockroaches, which are carriers of asthma triggers, are living and causing asthma to run rampant, 8 times the rate of kids in middle-class neighborhoods. The doctors, when they discovered this, can't do anything about it because there's nothing in the medical protocol, the medical research, or the medical body of knowledge about holes in walls. There's nothing they could do that would be more direct than patch the holes. But the doctors can't deal with that in their work because it's not based on any aspect of medical science. But it's absolutely obvious and self-evident that the first thing that should be done is patch the holes. And no one is going to do a research study on the holes because there isn't a field of holeology or a field of where asthma comes from. As far as they're concerned, asthma comes from the animals, not from the holes.
I don't find that a very convincing story. I'm sorry.
It depends if you want to take action or find scientific proof.
I know lots of physicians who actually take action. That was too simple a story. And if I look at the references that Irwin, Martin, and Flippen have to their particular paper, a large number of the references come from the medical profession. In fact, I don't see any references from the design profession.
That's true. That's what makes Kim's work so important.
What, that she said we should patch the holes? Come on.
No. Her work is leading to somewhere else. It was a secondary finding that we should patch the holes.
Patrick.
Yes.
Yeah. What worries me quite a bit these days when I look at design research all over the place is that more and more design research is driven towards blunt innovations and problem-solving type of research projects where we do all kinds of crossovers in the medical field, in the energy field, in all kinds of fields to come up with probably better solutions than we have today, but I see very little knowledge development over there. So you asked me before about the quality of the papers. This is seriously worrying me when I look. I did a lot of papers for the DRS conference and, as you said, for the next Design in Motion conference. I see a lot of practice-based design research projects going on around the world, and there's very little let's say, research that is really looking into what are the generalizable mechanisms or principles that we can draw out of these projects. What are the learnings that we can take out of this project in the medical field that we can use in the field of energy use or sustainability or whatever other fields.
Yep.
And that's the most important thing for our field to do, I think.
I agree with you completely. When I read the research papers, they all seem to be dealing with reacting to other papers on the periphery, and hardly anything is dealing with the center. Try and find the center of what design is in any of the journals, and I haven't been able to do it.
Patrick?
Yes.
Today, I've been visited many laboratories in the University of Cambridge, and I was thinking about the design. If you look at the electronic wave, discovery of electronic wave, and the connection between the basic research and, for instance, the mobile industry, there's so strong. At the present, there's one problem of research is we are brave people, and we sit together about, assumption which is a possible next design, we call design next, but still, as we addressed last time, the implementation still should be the key. At the present, because I mean, you guys, I mean, have a reputation, and the people, I mean, have to listen. But still, I see a lot of people, I mean, they have doubt about the real value of fund research. So this is something that I can compare to the other disciplines like physics, engineering. So I still think that the gap between research and also this real world should be filled.
Yes, I think that's a very real gap, and I think there's also a gap between the research, most of the research that's being done in the center of what the design discipline probably is. For example, there isn't an agreed upon theory of prototyping. There are different theories of prototyping, but you'd think that if any field had a theory of prototyping, it would be design. Getting to the core of what's at the center seems to be in desperate need. At the same time, I think we need to be able to move quickly in taking action on things. Like Don said at the beginning, we need both craft and theory. I think we need not view a dichotomy or a conflict between the way the practitioners work and the theoreticians work. We need to find a third way, that or maybe a third and fourth way. The third way dealing with finding the center of design, and the fourth way being convincing Don that self-evidency is a reasonable way to take action and not wait until there's proof.
I agree it's a way to take action. That wasn't the point. We're talking about trying to get a substantive research base, and that is not the way for a substantive research base or a theory.
Yes, I agree with you. I agree with that. And I agree completely with Paul about the problem of papers in design research. So we have 2 minutes left. Is there any general remarks that any of you are burning to say?
What's next?
What's next? I think small steps of action, like I think the Design X paper that you guys originated and that Tanji and that Don and Peter have extended is a good next step. And I think also that, to me, this question of what's at the center of design is something that maybe ID and Delft and San Diego and Hong Kong Polytechnic and Tanji should gather around and see if we can map out a course for that.
You said that new disciplines arise when the old disciplines don't satisfy.
Yes.
Do you think that we should have a new discipline for this kind of design, for substantive, broad-reaching?
I actually think that would be a good idea. I don't know whether we're ready for it, but I think it would be a good idea. I think moving the center of the existing design field into the center seems more difficult than starting something anew that has more rigor and more theory and more effective practice behind it. You know, public policy didn't set out to change public administration. Those programs still run for police chiefs and school principals. But the State Department needed something different.
Possibly there's not one center of gravity for design. You can think of different kind of sections that can grow and become stronger by themselves. We work now on 3 areas in Hong Kong, one being the field between design and business and strategy, which is a field in itself. The second one would be related to making, and prototyping was mentioned, but you know, there's a whole things of, there's so many things happening in the field of making. And the third could be social design, which is again a whole different area with different kind of theories and different types of professionals coming in. So I'm not sure that there's just, you know, one course for design to evolve. It could well be that it's kind of that subfields of design will grow more rapidly in the academics than others.
I agree with you completely that we want variety, but I think at the core there's something very basic. To me, it's 4 ideas: making, using, valuing, and stuff. There's the objects of the world, and there's how we make them, how we use them, and how we value them. And I think most things can grow out of those seemingly ridiculously simple points. But that's just me this week. It may change next week. So it's 10:01. We should.
Well, one of the things is certainly.
Go ahead, Ina.
It's certainly important position in this group, and maybe add the here and it. Otherwise, we will not be able to stimulate each other on next steps. So I value you have tried to bring us again together, Patrick.
Yes, and thank you to the listeners who joined us. You're brave souls to put up with the topic of our discussion on design theory, what's the nature of the field. So thank you all for joining me on this, and thank you to the audience for joining all of us. It's been interesting and to be continued. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, thanks.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
See you next time.
Bye, everyone.
Goodbye.
Hello.
Hey, Ken. Are you
Talk to
better?
you soon.
Are you better now?